Ideal for Gifted is celebrating National Parenting Gifted Children's Week. Our mission driven work focuses on three key areas: education, equity, and community. By nurturing the potential of the students in our care through advocacy and programming, Ideal is working daily to shape a virtual community of learning and belonging.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Mary Grace Stewart, and my guest today is Dr. Ann Lupkowski-Shoplik. She is the administrator of the Acceleration Institute, and today we're going to talk about what acceleration is and what it isn't, and how to develop it for our bright and twice exceptional children. So, hi, thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. I love talking with people about acceleration.
Well, it's a wonderful tool, so I'm excited that you agreed to come. So, Dr. Shoplik, could you please explain to our audience what is actually meant by acceleration? Because there's an awful lot of misunderstanding, I think, in the general public about it.
Sure. Glad to talk about it. So there's kind of a classic definition where we talk about a student moving through an educational program faster, at a faster rate, or at a younger age than is typical. And the whole idea behind it is trying to find a good match between the student's abilities and achievements and aptitudes and the curriculum that they'll be a part of. So, and then if we think about it, I think most of the time acceleration is considered to be grade skipping, right? That's the thing we jump to right away.
Right.
But acceleration actually comes in at least 20 forms, maybe more like 25 different forms when we start thinking
Wow.
about it. So it breaks into two general categories. The first would be whole grade acceleration, grade skipping. And examples of that would also include early entrance to kindergarten or graduating early from high school, entering college at a younger age, those kinds of things. And then the other general category of acceleration is subject acceleration, where a
Mm.
student might move forward in only one subject at a time rather than an entire grade. So maybe we have a student who's really good at math, so they're able to advance in math. Math only. Sometimes we also see students combine different types of acceleration. So we might have a student who's very strong overall that skips a grade. And then we find, oh gosh, no, they really have a special strength also in science and they need additional challenge. So we might also
Mm.
accelerate them in science. So we see those different kinds of combinations. And I would say a big thing about acceleration is we're really trying to tailor education for the student.
Tailoring the education to the student. So, how might a parent help the school understand acceleration if the school is saying something like, we don't do that?
Right.
Right.
And I would say kind of we have to take a step back and understand that first, a lot of educators don't learn much about gifted education or advanced education in
Mm-hmm.
their undergraduate preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, even if they specialize in gifted education and do a lot of work with gifted students, they might simply not have the opportunity to learn about acceleration. It's not
Mm-hmm.
always taught in undergraduate or graduate programs. And we at the Bell and Blank Center at the University of Iowa, we're trying to change that. And we've been working really hard for the last 20 or 30 years trying to let the public know about acceleration and about the research around acceleration.
Mm-hmm.
So we find that a lot of families learn about it on their own, and hooray for the internet! We're able to learn a lot of things about acceleration, and lo and behold, there's actually a lot of research on the topic. And we have about 80 years, 80 years of research about
Holy
acceleration.
cow.
Yeah, it's been studied a lot over the years. But again, many educators just have not had the opportunity to learn about it. So it can become kind of a balancing act where the parent might learn a lot about it, and then they're introducing it to the educators at their school. And
Hmm.
so I just, want to have help people to understand that it might just be new, and I think in our society, there tend to be a lot of myths around acceleration.
Mhm.
So we are concerned about that, and concerned about trying to counteract the myth.
Well, now that you brought it up, what are some of the
Well, I would say the number one myth centers around social development,
Mhm.
and social emotional development, and the idea that somehow acceleration is going to be bad for a student. And I want to
Mhm.
just take a step back and think, okay, so why are we even having this conversation? This student is, very strong academically, and we're thinking about how can we challenge the student more appropriately. So we're motivated by the academics. Okay, good. So let's learn about that student's academics and what do we need to do? What level is that student ready to study, et cetera. And how do we make things work around the social piece? Because of course we're talking about a whole child, right? It's not just a brain that we're trying to educate. We want to have this child develop well and in lots of different ways. So
Mm.
is their social development only going to happen with other children of their same exact age? Or will they be able to learn some socialization skills with older or with younger students? Will they have opportunities to meet with adults or work with adults at different times? There are lots of different ways for people to be socialized. And then I could get really into the research. So since we're talking about socialization, there has been a bit of research done about socialization or social emotional development with gifted students who have accelerated, and we find it's complicated, right? It's hard to measure social development, and it's hard to be objective about it, right? But we do have some tools that we're able to use, and we find that the students who accelerate tend to do about as well as the students who are in the same grade but older than they are, or they're doing about as well as the kids who they left behind, that the younger the same age students who are still at the regular grade level.
Mhm.
So the research is telling us there's not a lot of difference in terms of the students' social development, or there might be a little bit of a positive effect. And I think that's good news, right? That's telling us very clearly that acceleration is not harming the students socially.
Right.
And we
That
even
is.
have a 35-year study where a group of students who accelerated were followed over 35 years. And
Oh,
they did well. They did well. So,
awesome. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Um, is there a way for a parent to know that their child might benefit from some form of acceleration?
Well, I think we want to start asking some questions. I'm lots of kids say, "I'm bored," right? I'm bored.
Yeah.
This is not interesting, whatever. And we certainly might hear that with a student who might be a student considered for acceleration. So that might be one of our clues. Maybe we have a student who finishes their work quickly. They're asking much more sophisticated questions than the other students in the classroom. They're being noticed by other people. Maybe they've already been included in the gifted program at school.
Mm.
Although I will say that that's not a requirement for students to be considered for acceleration. We do have some kids who need acceleration who aren't selected for the gifted program, because gifted programs have different purposes and different goals, and they might assess students in different ways to figure out which students need that particular program. And I would suggest starting with the classroom teacher or the gifted teacher or the gifted coordinator. Have some conversations with them as you, the parent, are thinking about acceleration for your student, and thinking about having a lot of chances to talk to different people about this possibility.
I noticed on the website for the Acceleration Institute that there is a measurement tool, and it seems to cover quite a bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about that measurement tool?
Sure, sure. I'm happy to. So we at the Bell and Blank Center have been working on acceleration, like I said, for years and years. We've actually created a couple of different tools. One is the Iowa Acceleration Scale, and I'm one of the co-authors on that. Susan Asseline is the lead author, along with Nick Colangelo, and then some additional people, some graduate students who've worked on it over the years. And that's a paper and pencil tool that helps people to gather the appropriate data and think about is it a good idea for this student to be considered for acceleration? So that's been around for quite a number of years. More recently, we've developed the Integrated Acceleration System, which is an online tool. And
Oh,
that helps
wow.
people, again, to gather the appropriate information that's necessary for a decision about acceleration. And we need to look at things like the students' test scores, right? We want to know what their achievement is compared to their grade level, what their aptitudes and their abilities are, so that we really get a well rounded view of what they're ready to do. And so the integrated acceleration system really guides you through that process. Which tests should I use? How should I give them? Who are the appropriate people to give these tests? We really try to take people by the hand and help you think about all of that. So that's an important piece of. Then we also include asking the student questions. Do you want to accelerate? And we try to put that in student language, right? And help them to understand. You might be moving from one classroom to another, or you might be skipping an entire grade. What do you think of that? Do you have something that they can have a conversation and think about it together while they're talking there. And then we also interview the current classroom teacher. And as
Mm.
part of this whole process, there are many questions that people answer. The parents are asked to fill out a form online. They can do it, by talking with the person who's facilitating the discussion. Lots and lots of information is gathered, and then we recommend that we have at least four people on the team. There would be a facilitator who is often a gifted coordinator or maybe an administrator at the school. Then the current classroom teacher, the future classroom teacher who knows the kinds of things that students need to have learned in order to be well prepared for that new classroom. And then the parent or guardian is included in the team. And then other people can be part of the team as well. And again, there are all these different questions people answer ahead of time, and then the idea is to bring everybody together in the same room to have a discussion about it. And then the
Yeah.
integrated acceleration system actually produces a report that
Oh,
summarizes the data and gives a recommendation. And
wow.
we tell the team, you don't have to follow the recommendation because, it's a computer, right? It doesn't know the child. So the computer is giving you a suggestion of or a recommendation for that student. And then the team discusses that and makes the decision and creates a transition plan if they've decided to accelerate the student. So yeah, again, we're just trying to, take people by the hand and help them really understand what's important to know and to ask about so that they can make a well-informed decision.
Does, so let's say a child is skipping a grade, um, the, and it's in elementary school. So one teacher is letting go of the child, but the teacher who's receiving the child, do they need any kind of special training, or is there something that they can do to help the child fit in, or, make that change successful?
Yeah, I think it's important for the receiving teacher to meet the student ahead of time. You maybe give a classroom tour so that that student gets a little bit more comfortable with the room and the routine and different things before they actually start their first day. The this receiving teacher might talk to the other students in the class, kind of depending on the timing, right? If the student is coming in the middle of the year, it's easier to have that conversation with the other kids. and to prepare them just like they would. Teachers are good at this. They're used to receiving kids that have just moved into the area, or for whatever reason they're
Yeah.
moving from one room to another, right? So I certainly would recommend using those good skills that you have to help the students and make the transition and to be prepared. I think one of the things we've really tried to work hard on with the integrated acceleration system is a transition plan. So we have a document that helps to kind of guide people through that process and think about, okay, what things do we need to do? Well, if you're doing this in the middle of the year, if the student is skipping a grade in the middle of the year, there might have been some introductory information you shared with all of the families, back in September. Maybe there was a letter, a first day letter, right? That kind of thing you want to make sure you give to that family that's their student is coming into the classroom now in the middle of the year. Lots of people have a board on a bulletin board where they might list all the students' birthdays. Make sure our new student has their birthday up on the bulletin board. Simple little things like that to make the student feel welcome.
So much like if you had a student move in from a different town during the middle of the school year, what you would probably do to bring them in. That's
Right.
doable.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know
I
how to
think
do that.
so. Yeah,
And
and
how,
I think to add to that too, think about what kinds of or what kind of way do you want to talk about this with the other
mm,
students?
right,
Why is this younger student coming into the classroom? I think we can all be pretty matter of fact. Our student is ready for this, or our student needs to be in this classroom. We don't have to get into a huge explanation about it all, and just again encouraging the students to welcome the new student.
okay. So I think one of the things that parents are concerned about is that their child might be bullied by the older kids. Like, well, if you think you're so smart, blah, 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 blah. Do you have any words of wisdom for parents with regard to that? Does that happen much, really?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. I'm not an expert on bullying, so I don't want to pretend to give people advice about that. I would
Yeah.
say, what the experts say about bullying, whatever the circumstances, let's go with that. And I think that classroom teacher can talk to the students again ahead of time and let them know what's going on and prepare them and certainly step in appropriately to stop that kind of behavior if that occurs. I will say I don't hear a lot about that, honestly. I think I get it. Parents are concerned, what can we do to protect our student and how can we make sure that this is as positive as possible? That's always the
Right,
big concern.
right.
And but again, I don't hear a lot about it. And I'll say I was part of a study years and years ago where we interviewed college students who had accelerated previously, and they were what we call radical accelerants, where they skipped 2 years or more. So they were, quite
Oh,
young compared to the other college students that
mhm.
they were with. And we asked them, like, give us some advice or information we can share with other young students who are considering acceleration.
Mhm.
And they said that, first of all, they were really happy they did it. And there were definitely some bumps along the road. And there were some awkward situations, but they were temporary. So it was things like they were too young to date. They couldn't drive when their classmates were beginning to drive, things like that. But it was stuff that they just kind of lived through and they dealt with for, a year or two, and then it was fine. What we find, especially with these students who are very young, compared to the students in the classroom with them, sometimes the older kids look at them as almost a mascot, where they're very friendly and very positive toward the younger student. And I think they recognize kind of the uniquenesses, and they value them for their intellectual talents. So it's
Mm,
positive, and I think they're also aware that this younger student won't be coming along, when we're in college. They're not going to be coming along to the bar on Friday evening or whatever, right?
right, right.
So they kind of figure that out. Yeah, but again, the students talked about um, kind of awkward phases, but it was worth it in the long run. And they really talk about the gift of time, that they feel like they were able to kind of get through the routine education and be able to get into the more interesting things. And that actually opened up opportunities for them. So some of them might be double majors or complete a master's degree or a PhD or whatever because they have the time. So, I think that's another thing to consider as you're looking at the long path or the long
Well,
road.
speaking of college makes me think about money. And some
Mm. Yeah,
administrators,
right. It's important to plan. Right, right.
well, some administrators of schools will say, well, we can't do a certain thing because it costs too much money. Does acceleration of students cost much money?
That is a great question. The acceleration itself is not often very expensive. A lot of times we're talking about literally just moving a student from one chair to another in a different classroom. So it's not requiring us to hire another teacher or do special training or anything like that, right? So in that way, it's inexpensive. Where the expense is, I think, is in the time that it takes to discuss this and to
Ah,
make the plans for the student. So, are we making a good decision? Are we collecting the assessment data that we need so we can make a good decision? And it certainly does cost money for a school psychologist to give the tests and to write up the report, et cetera. And typically that's done in-house where it's a school psychologist or another professional in the school building who routinely does this kind of testing with the students. We also can use the information from the regular standardized testing that is done every year or every couple of years in school. So that those are the kinds of things that might cost money. But again, it's part of routine schooling and for the most part it's actually a very inexpensive alternative for students to get the right level of challenge for themselves.
so if a school doesn't have a gifted program, or if the gifted program is only maybe like an hour a week, do you think that acceleration is a helpful piece of the learning process for bright and twice exceptional kids?
Absolutely. I think that we want to consider acceleration for bright students. And we don't want to always wait for the parents to come to us and say that I think my child needs to be accelerated. We as educators need to be looking at our group of students and asking the question, are all of the kids in this room being appropriately challenged? What are the ways in which we can be challenging them? And some of the kids are just going to stand out and we might be thinking, maybe we do need to move this student up, and begin doing some of the testing that is important to help us to make that decision.
You mentioned when we started that there are like 25 different ways to do acceleration. We've talked about grade skipping and subject skipping. What are some of those other ones?
Yeah, so a lot of the details kind of get into in the subject acceleration realm. So um, we do consider advanced placement courses accelerative because these are high school students who are actually studying college level material. And the hope is that at the end of the course, they take the exam and they get a high score and they're able to get college credit for the work done. So that's one definite form of acceleration. And when I start introducing acceleration to schools, I like to talk to them about what are you already doing in your school
Mm,
that is acceleration, and AP is one of those things. Grouping students in an honors level class is
mhm.
another way that a student might be accelerated. They're moving ahead in the curriculum, and that school might even have a plan. It often happens in mathematics. Sixth grade are combining 2 years of math into one, and now they're on an accelerated path, right? And that's
Mhm.
something that's part of this school's curriculum. And yeah, lo and behold, that's actually acceleration for the student. Curriculum compacting, taking courses online and getting credit for them, working with a mentor individually, going into a lab and working with a scientist in a lab and having that kind of experience. Those are all different ways that a student might be accelerated in their education.
Can you explain curriculum compacting for our parents?
So, kind of the classic way is we test the students to see what they already know, and then we respond with a curriculum where we're presenting them with new material. So we might have a unit of study, and we give a pretest, and we determine that there's this, group of students in our classroom that really already know this material. So
Mm,
we will substitute other material. And when it becomes accelerative is when that other material is more advanced. If we're filling in the time that we save with just interesting positive activities, but they're not really moving the student through at a faster pace, then it wouldn't be acceleration. Like let's say the student tested out of a whole unit of mathematics, and now they get to work on the school newspaper.
mhm.
Lovely activity, very positive, but it's not accelerating them in math.
What happens when a student really probably should have been accelerated but doesn't have that opportunity? Do
Well,
you know?
all I can, yeah, who knows, right? This is the problem with education, right? We can't really know what might have happened or what could have
Yeah.
resulted if. But what we can do with our research is look at groups of students. And I talked a, a good bit about the social emotional research with acceleration, but I didn't
Mm,
talk about the academic research.
mm,
So, what kinds of differences do we see? So with the students in the immediate, if they accelerate this year, when we compare the accelerated students with the other students in the new classroom, so we're comparing our accelerated student to the older kids, they
mhm.
tend to do better academically. Their test scores are higher. They've learned
Ah,
more. They've achieved more. They're ready to move at a faster pace, even than the kids that are in the older grade. And then same
oh,
thing when we compare our accelerated student to the students they left behind. In
mm,
the old grade, they are doing better and achieving more academically, and that happens. The research shows us both in the short term and in the long term. So accelerated students tend to do better academically. Their grades are higher, and as we follow them through, their college grades are higher. They tend to pursue more advanced degrees. They tend to achieve more highly in their area. They get paid more. Their salaries increase at a faster rate. There's a lot of positive. And many of these research studies that I'm talking about compare equally able students. So,
ah,
so it's a true research study where we're looking at a group of talented kids and another group of talented kids. One
mhm.
group is accelerated, the other group is not accelerated, and we're
Right.
able to draw conclusions about those groups, and the evidence is pretty strong. And I've used words like educational malpractice, where if we don't
Mhm.
consider acceleration, it's really educational malpractice, because we do know a lot about this, and we do recognize that kids are very successful when they're
Right,
accelerated. And it's not for everybody. I'm not saying the whole world should be accelerated,
right,
but I want to really open the doors for people, and let's think about what are some different things that we can consider for these students. What are some accelerative alternatives for them? And I think what it kind of comes down to is we're teaching kids to work hard, right? We're presenting them with a challenge at a younger age, and we're raising the bar for them, and they're rising to the occasion, right? And so that's required if they're being accelerated. They're now being presented with harder material. So we're challenging them, they're learning to respond to that, and they're learning good habits of mind instead of, ooh, I can get all my homework done on the bus, or gee, and at the end of class before I walk out the door, I'll get all my homework done. Um, Gee, I don't have to think very hard. I can just sit down and write this essay. and hand it in, and I know I'm going to get an A plus because it's so wonderful, right? Well, what are we teaching the kid? We're teaching them to be lazy. We're teaching them not to plan ahead. We're teaching them that they don't have to apply themselves at all. We're teaching them that they're going to do really well without even trying. And then later on, when they come to a situation that's very challenging, they won't have the resiliency skills, really. So acceleration can really teach students a lot in terms of life skills, and that's what we want with education, right? We want kids to have to work hard and to apply themselves and to fail sometimes and to learn how to handle that failure.
Right.
We
Yeah,
don't want to wait till they're college freshmen to then suddenly, fail a course and feel despair.
right. Is there an especially good time to accelerate? Like, if you're going to, like if you're going from elementary school to middle school, or beginning of the year or middle of the year or kindergarten, can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think the best time might be early entrance to kindergarten because then we don't have any worries about socialization, right? Everybody's new, they're all making friends, they get to know each other, yay, that's great. Also, we're not worried about gaps in the student's educational
Mm,
background, right? Nobody's saying, oh gosh, they skipped second grade, they missed, they're not going to learn how to read or something. I don't know. But that could be ideal for some kids, but for many students, we just don't know, right?
mm,
Some students might be good candidates for acceleration later on, but right now, as a 4-year-old, they're not showing us everything that we need to see. Right. And we want to be cautious with the younger students. So I'm not saying like that this is the best idea for all these young bright students to enter kindergarten early. There are some kids who are going to stand out that are truly ready, and I think especially when we have a student whose birthday is within a few weeks of the cutoff, that
ah,
might be a stronger reason to consider early entrance to kindergarten. So in terms of other, good times to accelerate, um, and I'm talking about grade skipping when I'm really
mhm.
focusing on that. So it seems to be really helpful actually to do it in the middle of the year. And that actually is kind of counterintuitive. In some ways,
Yeah.
I want to just sort of sneak that student in and have that be invisible, that they're younger than the other kids. But you know what? People find out, and it's just better to be upfront about it. And, yes, this student is moving ahead. It's something that's necessary for the student. If they're in that same building and they're moving from one classroom to another,
Mm,
everybody around them can support them, right? And maybe, be on the lookout if there are any issues and help to add in the supports that they might need to make a good transition to this newer grade. We also like to see students complete the last grade in the building. So if we have a middle school building that's, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, then
mm,
fifth grade is an important year. Fifth grade is when the kids are taught a lot of skills that they're going to need when they move into sixth grade. There's some
ah,
really nice transitions that happen. And in another school, that might be sixth grade because the middle school building is seventh, eighth, and ninth, or whatever. So you want to look at your own local situation and think about what are the students needing to learn during that transition year. And I'm not saying, this is what should always happen, but I'm talking about kind of general advice
right,
that, we
right.
want to help the student to make a good transition, and that's one way to do it.
I've been telling people go to accelerationinstitute.com over and over and over for years now. Could you give them a little
Yeah,
share?
sure, sure. And I was just going to say, can everybody see my screen now? So this is accelerationinstitute.org, and this is a website that the Bell and Blank Center at the University of Iowa is providing to you free of charge. And there is a lot of information on here. So when you get on the page, you can just scroll down and see all kinds of different information. There's some various resources that are listed, the integrated acceleration system. If you click on that, it'll take you to the page about that system that I was discussing before. This next one, developing academic acceleration policies, is all about policy. If you're part of your schools, any of your schools teams that are making plans for policy, you can use that as a tool. The Bell and Blank Center and the National Association for Gifted Children and people from the state directors of gifted education around the country contributed to this. So lots of people's good thinking went into that product. Then A Nation Empowered is a report that the Bell and Blank Center put together. It includes chapters. Well, let me start with there's a volume 1 that is written for the busy administrator or the person who wants just an overview of acceleration. There's information about the research, and there are lots of stories seem to resonate with people. They want to hear about those individual kids that have gone through an acceleration process, and how has that gone, and how has that affected the family, and what did the teachers think. So we have those kinds of things in there. And then the volume 2 includes all the research to back up what we're saying in volume 1. And that this came out in 2015. And previously, there was a report called A Nation Deceived, where that was the first big report about acceleration that was ever done, and again by the Bell and Blank Center. And that was actually distributed widely across the country. And I know a lot of times when I talk to gifted coordinators, I'll say, "Oh, have you heard of A Nation Deceived?" And many people say, "Yes, it's on my shelf." And you can actually download the whole thing for free on our website. So yeah, it's great. It's great. We're trying to spread the good news and let people know about acceleration. There's information. The ideal solutions is information about grade skipping, or excuse me, I'm sorry, about subject acceleration and about some of the testing that's necessary for that. There's information about state policy. We've got a little bit about the Iowa acceleration scale. And we've even got a presentation about acceleration if you wanted to share it with a group of parents or with a group of educators at school. We've tried to do the work for you and gather the information in one place. And then we actually have a blog about acceleration, and you can subscribe to that there. So, this we tried to make this your one-stop shop with lots of information about acceleration. And you can even play over here with the menu and see, there's a research section. We have an annotated bibliography with zillions of articles on different areas about acceleration. So, you know, it's all there, we hope. And if it's
Thank
not,
you.
let me know and we'll add it.
Now we have some questions from the audience. They sent in to us. And are you up for some
Yeah,
things about
sure.
acceleration? Some of them we've already covered in our interview. Let's see. The question is, what is the potential downside of acceleration for my child?
Good question. Right. So, all right. You were talking about finances earlier when we were talking about college, and I'm going to say
Mm.
that's one of the downsides. Parents have to plan to send their student to college earlier, right? I mean, even if they only accelerate in elementary school, they skip a grade. Now they're going to be a little bit younger than they would have been to go to college, and those of us who are saving for college have lost a year. So that's certainly something to consider. Um,
Mm.
what goes along with that, I have seen kids who've accelerated, and that actually draws more attention to them. And some of those students have actually gotten more scholarships than I think they might have gotten if they had just been the regular age. So, it can go either way. Just wanted to call that to your attention, though. Other downsides, well, certainly it's hard especially at certain ages of a child's life, it's hard to be different, right? And this is a pretty obvious difference, especially if we're talking about grade skipping. This is why finding your people is so important, right? And we really want to encourage students to participate in various activities like summer programs or camps or competitions or whatever. So they have an opportunity to meet other kids more like themselves if
Mm.
they don't have that cohort within their school building, so that they realize that, yeah, I'm not the only kid like this. And so, yeah, so there's some of the downsides. And I would say, there are some awkward times, and that can be really challenging. If you as a parent have rules about the student dating or not dating, or other whatever bedtime rules, and they're different from the other kids, especially because of the age difference, those can
Mm.
be challenging discussions to have. And it just prepare yourself for them, certainly.
Um, this parent says that her child has been accelerated, but the classroom teacher is anti-acceleration and keeps calling on him to ask, "Do you understand? Do you understand that?" Which calls attention to him. And the mom is kind of concerned about that. Is there anything a parent can do to
Yeah,
have
that
the
that's
like
challenging.
have the child not? You already mentioned, they're going to be kind of an outlier anyway. Is there something that the parent might be able to do or say or to diminish that?
Right. I think that is a challenging conversation, but it sounds like it's really important to have that conversation with the teacher, right? This teacher is an adult, and to let them know that, you're noticing this, and your child's coming home reporting this, and it's causing some issues. What can we do about it? And that's why I kind of want to back up when we're thinking about potentially accelerating a student, thinking about who is that receiving teacher. And as we, the team that are making, these people are making the decision about moving a student into a new classroom, we do want to think about, okay, who's the best receiving teacher? Who is going to be supporting this student? It's easy for adults to undermine children, right? And if the child has long hair versus short hair or something, and you're constantly calling that out, that can be very upsetting to the student. And we as adults have to realize that and understand that. Yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
challenging situation.
So this one says, our child has been grade skipped twice, now entering middle school. The social dynamic is much more complicated. Any recommendations?
I like to think about having different groups of friends in different areas for the child. So,
Mm.
certainly they're going to have their classmates, right? Whatever age those kids are, those are their classmates. Now,
Mhm.
can we help the student to create other groups? If a student plays an instrument, are there other kids who are good at music that they can, hang out with? Can they be part of as the students get older, this gets more and more possible, right? That they can be part of a local band or whatever. And sports is another opportunity to
Mm.
potentially be with kids who are interested. Everybody's interested in soccer or whatever it is. That they have different ways to be with different groups. Scouts is another way to kind of forge this. Maybe from a local church, there's another group or club where kids can be different ages, and meet other people that have similar interests. And
Mm.
I don't think it's, well, I and many people who work with counseling gifted students or counseling typical students, we don't expect kids to have a million friends. They don't have to have a million friends, but we want to facilitate at least one or two good friends. And
Mm.
if we see that, then we can feel okay about it. And again, recognize that all kids go through development, and there are, different times of our lives that are challenging, right? And we as parents just want to support that and kind of, get through it in some ways.
My memory of middle school is not real positive, and I wasn't accelerated, but it was just middle school seems to be tough.
Yeah, kids are mean to each other, unfortunately. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Last question here. My PG child is homeschooled now, and the district officer frankly stated, we are ill-equipped to accommodate her. She's already way ahead of some of her age peers academically. How do I ensure that our accelerated plan is enough? what if it's still too easy?
Yeah. So what I've seen with radically accelerated students and with students who have, just exceptionally exceptional talents,
Mhm.
I like to think about kind of a patchwork quilt. So school wasn't made for them, right? The way that we have things set up just wasn't made for students who are that different. And
Mhm.
how do we figure out how to patch things together in a sensible way? Maybe our student, really needs some opportunities to be social with other kids. So maybe they need gym class with a group of other kids, or they need to be in a sport, as I was talking about just a few minutes ago, right? Are there things that they can do with their same age students? Now, I'm hearing in this question that the focus is on academics, right? And are the academics really challenging enough?
Right.
That's the $1 million question, right? And the balance is rigor and depth and time to study something and to really absorb it well
Mm.
versus always making sure we have a challenge. And we might see, some kinds of ups and downs where, gee, this material seems really kind of basic, but the student is able to get in depth with it and do some really, deep learning
Mm.
sometimes, and then sometimes being able to be more advanced. I would just want to help us all to think about, this is never a competition. Somebody else has already graduated younger than you could possibly believe, right? So we're not going to make that record. So let's just throw that out the window.
Yeah.
It's not about the speed, right? And
Right.
what it is about is consistency, that we want consistent challenge.
Mm.
I don't want to see kids speed through and then, they're all done with all the math that's available to them. And now they have no math to study. Well, there's always math to study, but let's make sure, how are we going to make sure that gap is filled then, that they're able to study something more advanced? And as we're continuing to move along, I really like to look for mentors, experts in the field, whether it's a college professor, whether it's an engineer, somebody in that student's life who has the skills and the understanding. And, maybe let's just have a little math club or a little science club or a literature club. And, the adult mentor can meet with the student on occasion and work on a project together, and that again gives them some depth and complexity that they could be working on to get some more challenge. And well, again, trying to balance not speeding through too fast, but being challenged.
Well, I think we've done a darn good job.
Well, good. Yeah, this is
Seem to have answered people's questions either in what we talked about originally or just now in the extra questions that were beyond what we talked about. Is there any other words of wisdom in closing that you might like to give to parents in particular?
I would say, good for you for watching this, and pat yourself on the back. We're all just doing our best, right? That these the kids just don't come with instruction books. We're trying to figure it out. We're doing the best we can. And to recognize that school wasn't necessarily built for students like the ones that we're talking about. And we're just trying to figure out the best way we can to put things together in a collaborative manner, with our school and our parents working together on behalf of the student, right? Always trying to put the student first. So, it,
I really
um,
liked your
I know you'll be
analogy.
able to rise to the challenge.
I liked your analogy of the quilt because the the blanket that is the school setting might be a big chunk, but then the idea that you could stitch other squares or whatever around to make it a little bit bigger is really, yeah, that really resonated with me. So thank you
Good.
so much, Anne, for your time and your insight and your dedication to our students and our children and debunking the myth of it'll be emotionally harmful, because it seems like it's more likely to be emotionally supportive.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, well, you're welcome. I enjoyed our discussion and hope it was very helpful to people. Thank you for inviting
Uh,
me.
I'm sure it was. It was for me.
Great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.